Today, I am 62 years old. My hair is gray, my hands are marked by time, but they are still steady. And after so much silence, I need to tell this story. If it reminds you of someone or touches your heart, stay with me until the end, because some truths can only be spoken when the soul is ready. It was March 1979. I was only 18 years old and 4 months pregnant. My belly was still small, almost unnoticeable, under the light pink dress my mother had chosen for me to wear to my older sister Sandra's wedding. She was 23 and had always been the perfect daughter, the pretty one, the smart one, the one who made our parents smile with pride. I was just ... the other one. I remember the smell of lilies that filled the church that March morning. The sun streamed through the stained glass windows, painting everything with a golden light that seemed to dance on Sandra's white dress. It was beautiful. She was beautiful, as always. But I felt the weight of the stares. They weren't looks of admiration like the ones she received. They were different. Whispers that stopped when I walked by. Forced smiles. That tension that only someone who has lived through a similar situation can understand. My parents had found out about my pregnancy 3 weeks before the wedding. Dad didn't speak to me for a whole week. Mom cried for 3 straight days, always asking, where did I go wrong? Sandra simply said that I had ruined the most important moment of her life. The baby's father had disappeared from the face of the earth as soon as he found out. It was 1979, remember, there was no WhatsApp, no internet, none of the conveniences of today. An 18-year-old single, pregnant girl was seen as a disgrace to the family, and I knew it. I felt it in every glance, in every silence. During the ceremony, I sat in the last row. My own family put me there. It's better this way, Mom had said. We don't want to draw unnecessary attention. Unnecessary, as if my presence was a nuisance, a mistake that needed to be hidden. I heard the vows, I heard the priest bless the union, I heard the applause when they kissed. But everything seemed distant, as if I were watching a movie where I was not a welcome character. It was at the reception that everything happened. The hall was decorated with white and gold flowers. The tables were covered with linen tablecloths, crystal glasses reflecting the lights of the chandelier. The smell of perfume mixed with the aroma of dinner. The sound of lively conversations, laughter, music playing softly. It was "Love is in the Air." I remember it well, because that song was playing when my life changed forever. I was sitting at a table in the corner, almost hidden, when Sandra approached with the microphone in her hand. She had had a few sips of champagne, her eyes were shining, and she was smiling in that way I had known since childhood. The smile she made when she was about to do something cruel. Everyone, she called for attention. The hall gradually fell silent. I wanted to thank all of you for being here on my special day. Family, friends, everyone who is here to celebrate love with me. She paused dramatically, her eyes searching for mine in the crowd. And I also wanted to take this opportunity to give some advice to the younger women here. My stomach clenched. I knew what was coming. Take care of yourselves, girls, because there are consequences to our choices. And some, she pointed directly at me, ... some can ruin not only your life, but the life of your entire family. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the whispers. Some people turned to look at me. I felt my face burn. Tears started to blur my vision, but I forced myself to stay firm in my chair. Fortunately, Sandra continued with a venomous smile. Today is a day to celebrate what is right, what is pure, what brings pride to a family. Some people laughed, as if my pain was funny, as if my situation was a spectacle for others' amusement. I looked at my parents. Dad was staring at his plate. Mom was nervously fiddling with her napkin. Neither of them defended me. Neither of them said a word. It was in that moment that I understood I was completely alone in the world. I got up from the table and walked out of that hall with all the dignity I could muster. But when I got to the bathroom, I broke down. I cried like I had never cried before. Deep sobs that came from the bottom of my soul, tears that seemed to carry all the pain, all the humiliation, all the rejection I had felt not only that day, but throughout my entire life. Because you need to understand that public humiliation was just the culmination of years of belittlement. Sandra had always been the favorite. Since we were little, she received the praise, the better gifts, the attention. I was just the younger sister who got in the way, who was never good enough. When she got high grades, my parents threw a party. When I got the same grades, it was the least that was expected. When she graduated from high school, she got a graduation party. When it was my turn, they said there was no money, but nothing compared to that day. I went home that night in silence. The car was filled with tension. Mom sighed from time to time. Dad drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. Sandra sat in the front seat, still radiant, still commenting on how perfect the wedding had been. Perfect, she repeated, looking at me in the rearview mirror. Despite some setbacks, we got home around midnight. The house I thought was mine. The house where I grew up, where I learned to walk, where I dreamed of my future. But when Dad parked the car, he turned to me. "You can't stay here anymore." Just like that. Simple, direct, like someone talking about the weather. "What do you mean, Dad? You made your choices. Now you'll have to face the consequences alone. I won't have a dishonored daughter living in my house, giving the neighbors something to talk about." Mom started to cry softly. I tried to raise you right, I'm 18, Dad. I'm pregnant. Where will I go? You should have thought of that before. Sandra got out of the car and walked towards the house as if nothing had happened, as if it had nothing to do with her, as if my despair was just another irrelevant detail of her perfect night. That night I packed a bag with the little I had. Some clothes, some books, a picture of my deceased grandmother, the only person who had always treated me with kindness. I also put in the few savings I had gathered working part-time at a fabric store, 120 cruzeros. It was all I had in the world. In the morning, before I left, I tried one last time. "Mom, I'm your daughter, please." She couldn't look me in the eye. "You made your choice when you opened your legs for anyone." Those were the last words my mother ever said to me. Words that were seared into my soul like a branding iron. I left home at 7 in the morning on a Tuesday in March. The sun was still rising. The air was cool. And I was walking the streets of my hometown carrying a suitcase and a baby in my belly, with nowhere to go. The first week was at a school friend's house. Christine. She let me sleep on the couch, but after a few days her mother made it clear that I couldn't stay. "I don't want to set a bad example for my daughter," she said. I sought out other friends, other relatives. Doors closed one by one. Some didn't even let me explain the situation. Others listened and said they were sorry, but they couldn't help. That's when I discovered what it meant to be truly alone in the world. I found a shelter for vulnerable women. It was a sad place, with peeling walls, the smell of cheap disinfectant and dampness. But it was a roof, it was food, it was safety. I shared a room with 3 other women. One had left a violent marriage. Another was on the street with 2 young children after her husband died in a work accident. The third was an elderly woman who had lost her home because she could no longer pay the rent with her pension. All of us, each with her own story of pain, trying to rebuild our lives from scratch. I spent the first few days just crying for the family that rejected me, for the boyfriend who disappeared, for the humiliation I suffered, for the uncertain future that awaited me. But after a week, I looked in the mirror of the communal bathroom and saw my growing belly. And I understood that it wasn't just about me anymore. There was a life growing inside me that depended on me. And if I didn't get up, if I didn't fight, we would both be lost. The shelter coordinator was named Donna Mercedes. She was a strong woman, in her 50s, with calloused hands and a firm gaze. She had been through difficult situations in her life and dedicated her days to helping other women. "Child," she told me at the end of my first week there, "tears don't pay bills, and they don't build a future. You have 2 paths. Either you keep crying for what you've lost, or you get up and build what you can still have." They were harsh words, but they were what I needed to hear. I started looking for work. It was 1979, a difficult job market, especially for women, even harder for pregnant women with no experience. I knocked on dozens of doors, stores, offices, factories, always the same answer: "We're not hiring, or you don't have the profile we're looking for." Until I found Donna Consecu. She had a small laundry in the city center. A simple place, with old machines and a constant smell of laundry detergent and fabric softener. When I went in there, she was struggling with a huge pile of clothes. "What do you want?" she asked without stopping her work. "Work, anything. I know how to wash, iron, sew, She looked me up and down, noticed my belly. "You're pregnant." "I am." "Where's the father?" "He's not in the picture anymore." She stopped what she was doing and stared at me. "Your family. They're not in the picture anymore either. Dona Conceição was silent for a moment, then went back to work. I can pay you a pittance. I can't register you. It's hard work, hands in cold water all day. And if you can't handle it, don't even bother showing up the next day. I can handle it. You start Monday at 6 in the morning. That's how I started to rebuild my life. I would wake up at 5, walk 40 minutes to the laundry because I didn't have money for transportation. I worked from 6 to 6, with a break for lunch. My hands became red and chapped from the cold water and chemicals. My back ached from the hours spent, bent over the machines. My feet swelled from standing all day. But it was my job. It was my dignity. It was my new beginning. With my first salary, I was able to rent a small room in the back of an elderly woman's house. It was small, damp, with a window that didn't close properly, but it was mine. It was where my daughter and I were going to start our life together. Yes, it was a girl. I found out at the ultrasound done at the public health clinic, and when I saw that blurry image on the screen, when I heard her little heart beating strong, I knew she would be my strength, my reason for living. The months passed. My belly grew. The work became harder. But Dona Consecu was understanding. A pregnant woman needs to work until the very end. She would say, money doesn't grow on trees. Isabel was born on a cold September morning in 1979, a difficult birth, in the public hospital, alone. No family, no friends, just me, her, and the medical team. When I held her in my arms for the first time, when I looked into those dark little eyes that seemed to understand me, I knew that all the pain, all the humiliation, all the fears had been worth it. She was perfect. She was mine. She was our chance to start over. If you've been through something like this, write in the comments. I'll read them, because sometimes we need to know that we're not alone in this life. I went back to work when Isabel was 2 months old. Dona Consecu let me bring the baby to the laundry. I would set up a little corner for her to sleep among the baskets of clean clothes, breastfeed her during breaks, and change her diaper in the tiny bathroom in the back. It wasn't easy. It was exhausting, but it was our life, and we were building it together. It was while working at the laundry that I discovered my talent for sewing. Whenever a torn piece of clothing or a ripped hem appeared, Dona Consecu would ask me to fix it. I had learned the basics from my grandmother as a child, but there I developed a skill I didn't even know I had. You have a good hand for this, Dona Consecu would say. You should think about working with sewing. And so I did. In my spare time, on weekends, I started taking on small repair jobs from neighbors. 5 cruzeiros for I intend to replace a zipper, 15 to alter a piece of clothing. It wasn't much money, but it made a difference at the end of the month. Isabel grew up healthy and smart. At 2 years old she was already speaking in complete sentences, had a smile that lit up our little room, and was my constant companion. During the day she would be with me at the laundry, and at night we would play on the floor of our small space. She with rag dolls I made from the scraps of fabric left over from the repairs. We were poor, but we were happy. We were a family. The years passed like pages of a book that one writes slowly, carefully, word by word. Isabel grew, and I grew with her. Not only as a mother, but as a woman, as a professional, as a person who had learned that life can knock us down, but we can always choose to get back up. In 1983, when Isabel turned 4, I managed to save enough money to buy a used sewing machine. It was an old, heavy Singer, but it worked perfectly. I set it up in our room, and our nights gained a new sound, the steady rhythm of the machine working, while Isabel slept and I sewed under the yellowish light of the single bulb. Word began to spread in the neighborhood. The girl from the laundry sews well and cheap. I started to get bigger orders, dresses for parties, children's clothes, more complex alterations. My clientele grew, and with it, our financial situation. In 1985, we were able to move into a small, but our own house, 2 rooms and a bathroom, a small yard where Isabel could play, and space for me to set up a makeshift studio in the living room. It was modest, but it was our real home. Dona Consecu had taught me more than laundry. She taught me about dignity in work, about not depending on anyone, about turning necessity into opportunity. When I left the laundry to dedicate myself full-time to sewing, she hugged me tightly and said, "You're going to go far, girl. You have grit." Isabel started at the neighborhood public school. She was an intelligent, curious child, full of questions about everything. She never asked about her father. I had told her he had left when she was a baby, and that was enough for her. We were a team, she and I, we were enough. The 1980s and 1990s were a time of constant growth. My name spread throughout the city. Look for Anna, people would say. She can do anything, and it's perfect. I hired 2 assistants, then 2 more. I moved to a small commercial space, then to a larger one. In 1992, Isabel graduated from high school as one of the top students in her class. She got a full scholarship to study business administration at a private university. On the day of her high school graduation, sitting in the audience, I remembered the scared, pregnant girl who had been kicked out of her home. I looked at my daughter on the stage, beautiful, intelligent, self-confident, and I knew that every tear, every sleepless night, every challenge had been worth it. During all those years, I never had contact with my family again. Sometimes I wondered how they were, if they thought of me, if Sandra had children, if my parents regretted kicking me out. But they were thoughts that came and went. I had learned to live without them, and I discovered that it was possible to be happy that way. In 1995, I opened my own shop, Atelier Anna, a beautiful, well-located space with a storefront on the main street of the city. I sold custom-made clothes, did alterations, and offered style consulting. The girl who had arrived at the laundry with a suitcase and a dream was now a respected businesswoman. Isabel graduated with a degree in business administration and came to work with me. Together, we modernized the business, created a more efficient customer service system, and expanded into evening wear and bridal gowns. The atelier became a reference in the city. "Mom," Isabel said to me one day, already 25 years old, "you know you're an example, right? You built all this from nothing." "Not from nothing," I corrected. "From love. Everything I did was for love of you, for love of the life we were building together." The 2000s arrived, and with them technology, the internet, new ways of working. We adapted, we created a website, started serving clients from other cities, and our clientele grew even more. I was 42, Isabel was 20. We were partners, we were mother and daughter, we were friends. We had built not just a business, but a solid life, based on work, respect, and dignity. I never married. I had a few relationships over the years, good men who knew my story and respected my journey, but none of them became central to our lives. Isabel and I were a complete family, and anyone who wanted to be a part of it had to understand and respect that. It was a Thursday afternoon in October 2008 when the past knocked on the door of the present. I was in the atelier, checking the month's earnings, when Isabel came to call me. "Mom, there's a lady here who wants to talk to you about a job." Something in her tone of voice caught my attention. I got up from the table and walked to the service area. And there she was, Sandra. She was different, very different. Her hair, which had always been her pride, was gray and unkempt. Her clothes, which had always been impeccable, were old and worn. Her face, which had always radiated confidence, was marked by lines of worry and fatigue. But it was her eyes that told the whole story. Eyes that had once been arrogant now seemed lost. Eyes that had once shone with malice were now dull, desperate. She didn't recognize me immediately. 29 years had passed. I was different to older, more mature, well-dressed, with the posture of someone who had built something solid in life. I was no longer the scared 18-year-old girl. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice hesitant. "I heard you're hiring seamstresses. I came to see if you would have an opportunity for me." I was silent for a moment, observing her. Isabel was by my side, not understanding what was happening, but sensing the tension in the air. "And what is your experience?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I know how to sew. I learned when I was younger. I don't have recent professional experience, but I learned quickly. I really need this job." The irony of the situation was not lost on me. The woman who had publicly humiliated me for being pregnant and dishonoring the family was now here, in my shop, asking for a job. The woman who had been an accomplice in my expulsion from home now needed my help. "What's your name?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. Sandra Oliveira." "Isabel," I called to my daughter, "could you give us a moment?" Isabel nodded and retreated to the back of the shop. Sandra and I were left alone, separated only by the service counter, but in reality, separated by almost 3 decades of history. "Sandra Oliveira," I repeated, letting the name roll off my tongue slowly. That name is familiar to me. She looked at me more closely, trying to place me. Do you know me? I took a deep breath. For a moment, I felt the 18-year-old girl stir inside me. I felt again the humiliation of that day, the pain of rejection, the despair of being alone in the world. But then I also felt the strength I had built over the years, the dignity I had earned, the life I had created. I'm Anna Oliveira, your sister. The shock on her face was instantaneous. Her mouth fell open, her eyes widened, her hands trembled slightly. Anna, my sister. But how, you, how, what, Sandra? How did I build all this? How did I survive? How did I manage to become a businesswoman after being kicked out of the house pregnant and humiliated at your wedding? She turned pale. She sat down in the chair. We had 4 customers, her legs seeming to have lost their strength. Anna, it's been so long, 29 years, I said precisely. 29 years since you humiliated me in front of all your wedding guests. 29 years since our parents kicked me out of the house. 29 years that I have lived without a family. Tears began to stream down her face. They weren't tears of remorse, at least not yet. They were tears of shock, of recognition of a situation that she probably never imagined could happen. How did you know where I was? She asked. I didn't. You came here. You knocked on my door asking for a job. The universe has its ironies, don't you think? Sandra was silent for several minutes. I could see the thoughts passing across her face, the attempt to process the situation, to understand how the sister she had helped to expel from the house had become the owner of the establishment, where she was now asking for a job. Anna, we were young. It was a different time. Dad and Mom, double quotes. No, I interrupted. Don't blame Dad and Mom. You were there at that microphone. You pointed at me. You publicly humiliated me. You chose to do that. I know it was wrong. I always knew. You always knew, and you never did anything to fix it. I didn't know where you were. You disappeared. I didn't disappear, Sandra. I was kicked out. And during all these years, you could have looked for me. I've always lived in this city. My name has always been here, working, building, growing. You chose to pretend I didn't exist. She lowered her head. Dad died 5 years ago. Mom is in a nursing home. She, she has Alzheimer's. I felt a pang in my chest. My parents, as much pain as they had caused me, they were still my parents. And you, I asked, how did you get here? My marriage, it didn't work out. We divorced 10 years ago. He got everything. The house, the assets, even the alimony. I didn't know how to defend myself legally. I have 2 children, but they live with their father. They think I'm a failure. The irony was cruel, but real. The perfect daughter, the one who was held up as an example of virtue and success, had lost everything, while I, the disgrace of the family, had built a prosperous and dignified life. I'm living in a rented room, she continued. I work as a cleaner in some houses, but it's not enough. I'm 3 months behind on rent. When I heard that Italiana was hiring, I thought it could be my chance to start over. I looked at her for a long moment. The woman who had once been my tormentor was now before me, vulnerable, needy, asking for my help. I had the power to refuse, to return the humiliation, to close the door on her as she had closed it on me. But I was not her. I was not the cruel person she had been. Sandra, I said, my voice firm but not cruel, I'll give you the job. She looked up, surprised, hopeful. But you will work like any other employee. You will keep to the schedule, follow the rules, do what is necessary. You will have no privileges for being my sister, because, frankly, for 29 years you chose not to be. I accept any condition. And there's one more thing. My daughter, Isabel, is my partner and the manager of this shop. She doesn't know who you are yet, but she will. And she will be your supervisor. The daughter you considered a shame to the family grew up, graduated, and today is an exemplary professional. Sandra nodded, the tears still streaming down her face. Why? She asked. Why are you giving me this chance after everything? I paused to think about the answer. Because really, why was I doing this? Out of pity, out of subtle revenge, out of kindness. Because, I said finally, I learned that holding a grudge only poisons the one who holds it, because I chose to be different from you. And because I believe that everyone deserves a second chance, even those who didn't give that chance to others. Thank you, she whispered.